Lucy, your thoughts on the freedom to make mistakes and fail upwards just reminds me of, I think it's my favorite story from one of my favorite teachers, Dr. Bertram Pariser, rest in peace. And I would love to maybe put this out there as a clip to just show my love and admiration for that gentleman, because he told me a few stories in our time together, and this one resonates with me to up to today, and it's a little bit about failure. So Dr. Pariser went to MIT, and like most young people at MIT, he was probably the smartest kid in his Long Island city where he grew up. But when he goes to MIT, everyone is that, right? So he's amongst really smart people, and he tells me that he's sitting in his year-ending physics exam, and he's big hall. Everyone's taking this 3-hour exam. He's 2.5 hours into it, and he says, "I'm looking down at my paper, and I say to myself, if I have everything right on this paper, I have a 50, and I've just flunked out of MIT." As he's having this internal monologue with himself, some person gets up from the back, walks to the front of the room, rips their paper in half, quarters it, throws it in the garbage, and walks out the door, slams the door. Everybody just for a second is like stunned silence. He then goes back, looks at his paper, does the best he can, finishes it up, hands it in, goes home thinking, I just failed out of MIT my first year. Spends the summer in angst, doesn't want to have anything to do with academics. His mom comes to him one day and says, your grades came. I don't want to see my grades. And she says, well, what subject do you think you failed? He said, physics. She says, well, you got a B in physics. So he says to himself, for 1 second, he's elated. Then he comes to the realization that this is a mistake. I have someone's B, they have my F. So he spends the rest of the summer in angst. But he goes back to MIT in the fall, and actually, it's almost dramatic, theatrical. He sees his teacher at the top of a staircase. So he approaches his teacher and says, Professor, I have to be honest. You gave me a B for my physics grade. I think that's a mistake. I should have an F. I only got a 50 on that exam. And he says to my teacher, no, actually, you got a 42 on that exam, but with the curve, you got a B. He said this story, I almost think nonchalantly, but it is seared into my brain, because two things that I took from that little story. One, the kid who tore up his paper and walked out of the room did flunk out of MIT, without a doubt. A zero's a zero, and he wound up failing out. But the second thing, I don't know if my instructor wanted to convey this, but it did, is I realized that day that there are places in the world that view failure differently than I view it. Like MIT might be one of those places, because it made me start to think maybe MIT is looking at it like 42% of this problem solved in 3 hours. Not bad. Like we weren't looking for you to get 100 on this exam. We wanted to see what you could do in 3 hours. What could you have done in 5 hours? What can you have done if we gave you the book? What could you have done if you took this home? So 42% of a problem solved is pretty good, because maybe we're training you not to pass exams. Maybe what we're trying to train you to do is solve problems that don't have easy answers. Can you be the kind of engineer that can solve a problem that might take 3 years to solve? Can you be the type of engineer that might have to tackle problems that you might never solve? So for me, that idea of, yeah, 42 is a good job, really opened my eyes to testing and failing and problem solving, and the fact that certain people look at it differently as than others. And it just made me realize that failing to advance is the way that we as humans do everything. Why not do it in academia?